Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to start by asking all of us to give a big round of applause to Don Grady and Heather Burks. The work they have done to put this symposium together has just been amazing. And I thank Don for inviting me to be part of the sessions. I started the program in media analytics at the graduate level in 2006, and during that time, it has been very successful, and we've seen the demand for graduates in this area skyrocket. One of the problems we've all faced, for those of us who have been teaching in this area, is a lack of a textbook and access to data. And I just wanted to tell you that I am in the process of writing that with my colleague, Amy Jo Coffey at the University of Florida. It will be out with Taylor and Francis next year, and yes, it will have data and cases for you to work with. So help is on the way, and I hope you'll find that helpful, and I will welcome any suggestions that you have for material that should be in it, and also your reviews once it's out. But today we have 5 outstanding people here, faculty and an undergraduate student who's just finished a media analytics program at Elon, to talk about issues in instruction and how we can teach analytics, because as we all know, many of our students are math phobic, and they come with content in mind, and often it's hard to get them to understand why this is relevant and how much fun it can be. So I'd like to begin with Professor Jennifer Robinette from Marist College, and she'll be presenting the paper, Cultivating Analytics Proficiency in Communication Undergraduates, a sequence of social media active learning experiences in an applied research class. Jennifer?
I have titleitis, so obviously from the title of that presentation, or my paper and presentation, so apologize for that. Let's see. Where? Escape. Okay. And then there we go. Okay, so the more interesting and dynamic title for my presentation is actually Developing Professionals with Strategic Communication Skills, and that is something that we work very hard to do at Marist. A lot of research has shown that there is a mismatch between the demand for analytic skills in the workplace and our preparation of our undergrads for those skills. So 76% of 747 Fortune 500 company and marketing agency executives surveyed said that analytic skills are important or very important, and also identified it as the largest gap between employer needs and available talent at approximately negative 37%. Industry advisors recommend prioritizing curriculum improvements to better prepare students for utilizing social media tools. So the challenge is spark the desire and ability of undergraduates to understand data analysis. They understand social media, but to understand data analysis, of course, is a level up challenge for us as professors. So the game plan here is active learning, a sequence of different experiences where one experience reinforces the next. According to an article called Active and Experiential Learning, well-designed active learning experiences include engagement, where students engage with the material individually or in groups. The time frame should be short and clearly defined. The tasks should be simple, clear, meaningful, and feasible within the time frame, which sometimes I struggle with as a professor. And the end game is that the end result should be unambiguous. What you want to achieve should be unambiguous. As a professor, I hear students talking all the time about the best Instagram time. So I thought, well, could we leverage student interest in likes, the number of likes that they get when they post something on Instagram, with some sort of activity-based learning that would involve social media analytics, and then use the results of that experiment to teach them data analysis, an experiment that they participated in themselves. Maybe that would make it more interesting to them. So research has shown that activity-based learning helps research method students become more realistic about how and why they need to collect certain data. And I noticed that what they were basing their best Instagram time perceptions on was blog entries, just talking amongst themselves. No real data. So they had an interest in data analysis and social media analytics, but they obviously don't know the specifics that they need for it. So I need to teach them about experimental process in the class that I teach, Applied Research and Analytics. So I need to teach them about that. I want to teach them about social media analytics and use that information from the experiment on social media analytics to teach them about data analysis. So those are my 3 goals. I created an experiment that the class participated in. They were divided into 2 groups. There was a treatment group and a control group, and they took a pre-test and a post-test. I posted I used our online learning management system to divide them randomly into treatment groups. Then they were sent a message saying that they had been assigned to this group, and then sent a link to the pre-test. They took the pre-test at the beginning of the class, and then I handed them some handouts, and then also they completed a post-test in class. The pre-test and post-test included questions like, because my goal to show them the experimental procedures and control, the difference between a control and a test group, was to give them information about bots, because they also don't seem to be very aware of bots on Instagram. So I thought, we'll have an experiment about the best Instagram time, slip in some information about bots into the treatment group, right? And then see if we can change their perceptions about the activity of bots on their accounts and their interactivity with bots on Instagram. So I had a couple of questions about their Instagram followers being social media bots, and then the accounts that they follow being social media bots. And then if they didn't, for some reason, have an Instagram account, which none of them answered that they did not have an Instagram account, but in that case, they would have only answered the next question, which is just that some of the content on Instagram is posted by bots, and then some accounts are bots. All right, so then there was the information about the best Instagram time, that what was their perception pre and post test about the best Instagram time to post. And then basic demographics, because I also teach them about, of course, survey research methods. After they participated in the pre-test, then reading the information, then the post-test, we have a new social media center at Marist. It's a little fishbowl that's on the bottom level of our building, and we have the software from Salesforce that helps to analyze the social media activity. So it's small, and this is not the picture of my classes in there. There were a lot more students that we crammed into that space. But it's very prominent. We're trying to get it started, and we have a student board now for it. And so I thought, okay, so after we do this experiment, what if I take them to the social media center to see analytics in action on a larger scale? And that's what we did. All right, and this is our assistant dean explaining it to them. Okay, so then the following class, I take the results of the experiment and I teach them data analysis. This is the basic research design. I give them a handout that has blanks that they can fill in with all of this different information, like what's the independent variable, what's the dependent variable, what's our potential intervening variables, how do we control for that, and then they're filling this information in on their handouts as we're going through it. I can teach them about things from the results of a question just about age on demographics, like the difference between ordinal and ratio level data. And then I show them that I can calculate their average age with asking about age the way that I did at the ratio level. I can show them with their own data, what are crosstabs, and taking a nominal level variable like gender and crossing it by experimental group to show them what a crosstab is. So because they participated in it, I think that they pay more attention to it and are more interested in it. Show them the differences in the experimental groups, which it makes a lot more sense to them. I can show them comparison of means, show them with the treatment group. There was a definitely directional trend there, explain significance level, and then the control group, of course, the spurious relationship there, that makes it clear. I can walk them through choosing the test for significance. They know that the experiment involved differences between groups, same participants tested more than once. Yes, how many groups? 2 groups, t-test for dependent variables, dependent samples, sorry. All right, and then I can show them these very confusing SPSS outputs, but hopefully will make a little bit more sense to them as I point out the results of their dependent samples t-tests and the significance, whether there were any significant differences. So what we ended up finding was some things were highly correlated, including some of our intervening variables. So to wrap up, the pre-test and post-test measured whether or not their accounts were private, and that did influence the results, and we didn't get quite as extreme differences in the groups as we would have liked, and they can identify the fact that whether they have a private account or not influences that. So the final research design looks like this, and that's how I tried to make it more interesting for them.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I've asked all of the speakers to keep their remarks to 10 minutes so that we'll have a chance to have a lively discussion and questions afterwards so you can follow up. So our next presenters are Kathleen Stansbury and Madison McKenzie of Elon, and they're talking about equipping the Media Analytics Toolbox, a study of skills required for entry and mid-level media analyst jobs.
Hello, thank you for having us here today. I'm a new faculty at Elon University. This is my first year there. And what drew me to the university was the opportunity to have not just a course in media analytics that I could help develop, and not just a way to kind of shoehorn analytics into existing classes, but a full 5-course major in media analytics. So our students go through their core curriculum, they take their curriculum or their electives, but they also have 5 full courses in analytics and can complete a major in this area. So that's been a wonderful experience for me. But at the same time, it's a bit challenging because we're not just looking for that one textbook that doesn't exist. Really glad to hear that it's hopefully coming out. We need material and a plan and a structure for an entire major. So in speaking with some of our graduating students, we wanted to make sure that we were producing graduates that were really ready for a workforce that's changing rapidly, that often doesn't really know yet what they need. Our students are often going to be the ones that are going to help them develop their areas and their expertise in analytics, particularly in both traditional and emerging media, and corporations and organizations. If every organization is now a media company, every organization also needs to be a data company. All right, so that has a lot of opportunity, but also this is an emerging area. It's not quite the desolate wasteland that I'm depicting here, but honestly, it's not that far off. Much of the pedagogical research in this area looks specific, discipline-specific, analytics and journalism, teaching math to strategic communication majors, ad buys. We don't have a lot of holistic research pedagogically in the overall issue of media analytics. So I worked with a graduating senior to try to start the ball rolling in that area.
So I think that's placed properly. Our research questions were, what skills are required for internships, entry-level and early mid-level jobs in media analytics? And then second, what, if any, software programs do employers prefer employees in media analytics positions to have experience? This is talking about our methods. We took a sample size of 100 job ads across using the search term media analytics across Career Builder, LinkedIn, and Indeed. We both coded independently the full data set. We originally coded for hard skills, soft skills, and technological requirements. We did find some little inconsistency between the two of us about the difference between hard skills and soft skills, so we minimized that to just a whole skill category. And then our analysis, we used KH Coder, which is a text mining tool, to look at term frequency and co-occurrence analysis. So this first slide is a results term frequency for our coding for the skills. As we can see here, the ones on the very left is writing, collaborative, and verbal. At the highest level, in over 50% of the job ads, good writing skills are being requested. So what we took from this is that in the media analytics profession, a good foundation of communication skills is very important to still have and then build on with the analytics. So this is a co-occurrence analysis graph. The larger the circle, the higher the frequency the term was used in the job ads, and then the lines show the interconnectivity. The thicker the line, the more they were mentioned together. And it kind of discusses the same thing, where the good foundational skills are not only clumped together, but they are larger. What we saw from the skills is that good foundation of communication is really important. Then looking at the technological requirements, on the left, the highest is Google Analytics in over 40%, with Excel in second in a grouping of social media metrics. The sixth in from the left is SQL, which is the first data visualization or kind of advanced data tool we see in the grouping here. But what we took from this is it's important to see that there is a broad range of tools mentioned across these just 100 job applications. So in this co-occurrence analysis, we saw that there are different types of technological skills tend to co-occur across the job ads. So the clusters group together. So the green one on that top left-ish, that's the Microsoft Office suite. To the next, the yellow is social media metrics and platforms. The purple represent some data visualization tools. And the bottom one is like coding and mining and programming tools. So a broad range of job ads, and the technological skills are co-occurring across the jobs. So our findings, we found that instead of a very deep understanding of 1 to 2 tools, job applications are looking for a general proficiency across all different media analytics tools and techniques. They are seeking media professionals with data experience as opposed to data scientists working in media. So yeah.
Now, this poses some challenges for us as educators. We need to essentially teach students everything, which is not possible. It isn't, but we can start to get an understanding of both the range of what current programs are teaching and also the variety of potential skills that employers may be looking for. And we do see in some of our data and our findings, particularly in the area of technological skills, that things such as the ability to at least understand how to do some basic coding, what it looks like, how it might work well. We often talk to students about saying not everyone needs to be a professional photographer, but you need to be a decent photographer and know what makes a good picture. I think we're seeing that same understanding with data, that you don't necessarily need to be a data scientist. If you are, that's wonderful. That's an area you can specialize in, but you need to understand basic numerical literacy. You need to understand what the tools are, what they look like, so that you can work with those in these emerging areas. Our next step, this is a very preliminary study. We'd like to expand our data set. We'd like to refine some of the coding categories. I've actually already scraped the entire, I scraped the entire Media Bistro job board. So we've got about 550 job ads to code, so if anyone's bored during BEA and they want to spend a little time pulling out job skills, I've got a data set for you. So that's our next step. And we also hope to supplement some of these quantitative findings with qualitative interviews with existing professionals who are working in media analytics. And we'd like to continue to focus primarily on early and mid-level career positions, because I do think that we are going to see those early and mid-level career individuals, they are going to be the ones leading this industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen and Madison.
She's
and
an
you-
undergraduate. Let me just learned all of these tools, learned new methods.
Thank you.
On her own time, not part of a class, just volunteered.
Our future. And our next presenter is Dr. Miao Guo at Ball State University, integrating media analytics across journalism and mass communication curriculum, digital and social opportunities.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Just a little bit background information why I construct these papers. Actually, the last year, I organized 2 panels focused on the media analytics. So I invite my panelists to share how they specifically teach a media analytics class. And the professor across the United States, they've from the different disciplines, some from the journalism, some teach the strategic communication. I teach the audience analytics, and other professors teach the journalism. So I think, actually the analytics, digital analytics, actually already embraced by the different disciplines in journalism and mass communication field. So that is why I construct these papers. So basically, in my paper, I gave some basic information, defined media analytics, social media analytics, and the digital metrics. And also I discussed the leverage digital analytics tools in this, in our journalism and mass communication education. In my paper, actually, I specifically focus on how embedded different digital media analytics and the tools used for different class, for example, related to the media sales management, related to strategic communication, related to audience analysis, related to the specific social media analytic class. But because this information I incorporate into the big tables, 2 pages table, it's too hard to present in my slide, but I would like to share my own experience to teach digital analytics in my audience analysis class through the service learning approach. First, I would like to share some of the previous studies, how we categorize different media analytics. So this is from one study. They think the media analytics maybe can categorize these 3 categories: rudimentary analytics and some data, but not linked to the decision making. And the generic analytics, maybe they have kind of the multiple stand tools, and for short-term optimization. But basically, the most analytics used in the industry is editorial analytics. So that means they are heavily used in today's newsroom to align with editorial priorities and organizational imperatives. So in my papers, so I list discuss some the features related to these digital analytics tools. So basically, I think you guys here, sitting here, I think you are the analytics expert. You already know some of the very popular analytics tools used by the industry and used academic institute. So I want to specifically point out here is the one is called ShareRocket. So this probably you guys seldom heard this too. This is specifically related to the social TV ratings analytics tools developed by the industry and used by the broadcasting industry. So these tools used by the local TV station to measure the social TV rating and also measure their talent, the social media performance. And another analytic tools is called Shareably. So this is also the industry tools used by the industries and media organizations to conduct the competitor analysis, because if you subscribe to these analytic tools, you can compare your local market with your competitors' analytics information across different social platforms. So basically, in my paper, I propose to categorize these different digital metrics based on the different interests, for example, reach, engagement, loyalty, conversion, and impact, and also combine the different the platform. For example, in my paper, I proposed to categorize these metrics based on the different digital platforms, online, web data, social media data, and mobile data. So in my paper, basically, I specifically analyze what kind of metrics in terms of reach, what kind of metrics in terms of engagement, and what kind of metrics in terms of these different three platforms. And these different metrics, what kind of metrics is key metrics can be used in our different class across journalism and mass communication curriculums. So actually, I want to use the rest of the time to specifically introduce my class. I use this service learning class to teach the class work with local TV stations. So basically, my class form a partnership with a local TV station. This is an NBC affiliate station in Indianapolis market, and the station granted my students to access all these social media and website data. And my students do this analytics program practice, and then based on the data analysis, my students produce a very detailed writing report, present their findings, analysis, and provide actionable recommendation to my client. So here's the data, the local TV station let my class to access to the website data. And we also let my students access to the Facebook and their Facebook Insight, analytics, the Twitter data, and Instagram. And we also install the Chartbeat, let my students to track their website, the performance. And this is the one case from this local TV station's website. And also this is a Facebook Insight data analysis. And another apps we also use in my class analysis is called CrawTangle. So basically this can track the WTHR TV talents, the social media performance. So actually this local TV station, they embedded different social media platform for their anchors, for their reporters, for their journalists, the social media performance, and ranking their social media talents performance in their newsroom big board to show the social media performance indicators. And also, my class used Shareably to monitor the local market. So basically, this is one piece of information related to the Facebook share, related to 500 most engaging posts. So this is the Facebook share related to this local 5 local TV stations in this market. So basically, you can see from this data, actually, we have the leader in this market, but my client with my class is not the leaders. So in the final report, so my students working on this, the analytics report, we have the 4 major components to provide this analytics report to my client. But I actually want to update information here because this is from my last year class. So for this year's class, actually, my students sampled 500 most engaging Facebook posts. We do the content analysis, use the text mining programs, for example, R. We also do the sentiment analysis for these most engaging posts. This requirement from my client because the local TV station actually want to find out what kind of most engaging Facebook post can track their Facebook user. and also how this Facebook user can go back to their official website. So my students sampled 500 most engaging posts. So we do the text mining, and I want to share some information here. So basically, a lot of the political information post and also crime-related posts are very engaging for the Facebook users. And also, another information here is related to the promoted post. So basically, it's called boosted post. Thus, the boosted post can engage more engagement compared to non-boosted post. So based on my class analysis, actually, there's no significant difference. So we provide this information to our client because our client actually, they try to boost some Facebook posts to improve the engagement. But statistically saying, there's no significant difference. But in other ways, the boosted posts indeed create more shares, more reactions, more comment from the Facebook user. So it's kind of hard to balance. If you just statistically saying there's no big difference, but the real number actually, the Facebook user are showing more engagement related to this boosted post. So basically, here is my inclusion here. So we need, as other presenters said, we need to have this analytics concept for this development of the critical thinking skills among the journalism and mass communication students. And also in my class, in my papers, I also discussed these different features of digital analytic tools, comparing along with the use of relevant digital and social media metrics for accessing effectiveness across these different curriculum. So one pedagogical suggestion maybe use the service learnings to have the real client, because that let our students can access to the real data to know what is going on in the real world. Okay.
Ask a group of measurement experts to stay to 10 minutes, and they'll come in under time all the time across the board. So we'll have plenty of time for a lively discussion. Thank you, Dr. Guo. And our final presenter is Diane Finch of Salem State University. Adjuncting and freelancing, and I'll turn it over to you. Why don't you try to go ahead? Yeah, all right, thanks. Okay.
Is it in Don Grady, 16?
It's down below this T. Finch,
Sorry.
We'll just move this out of the way,
Okay.
and then there it is.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Okay. All right. Yes, I'm Diane Finch, and I've recently moved back home to Massachusetts, and I am freelancing and have been adjunct teaching. I would like to thank Don Grady for inviting me to this. I was a visiting professor at Elon for, I think, 4 years and enjoyed every minute of it. But it was time to come home to Massachusetts. I have elderly parents, long story. My background is different. I'm not a PhD. I do have a master's in journalism, spent time in journalism. And prior to that, I was in the IT and computer programming industry. Obviously, I'm showing my age, but I'm kind of an odd animal in a group like this. And my presentation is very practical. I have taught data visualization at Elon in the graduate program, and I teach it in every class I teach now. I at least do a small module of playing with Excel and Tableau. And over time, I'm realizing how to get students more interested, even students that are not joining a data visualization class. In the fall, I taught an audio production class, probably the most fun class I ever taught, by the way. And we actually did Tableau in that class, and they did some multimedia presentations. So this PowerPoint is really just meant to give me some thoughts. It's mostly photos and images. But what I would like to talk about in my 10 minutes is what students expect when they hear data visualization and why they become so fearful when they find out what it really is and how to get around that. First thing that, oh, I'm showing the wrong thing, hold on. Told you I was a little different here. Okay, that's better. Okay, so this is what students think they're gonna do when they arrive in my class. They love art, of course, we all do, but this is what they want to do. And then they find out about this. And then they tend to, I'm gonna skip by this one for a minute, look like this, okay? So what I have decided is they need to know right up front that this is where they're gonna be for 85% of the time. Talk to anyone at New York Times, talk to anyone who does this work. This is where they're gonna be. So how do we get them to be comfortable with starting with Excel? I promote Excel everywhere now. My husband works and cannot find graduates that can do Excel for his project management. He has to train them. This is not good. The whole point of him hiring an intern to do Excel is to take time to do his other work. So he's training people. Take this, I'm using an example that's not actually media analytics. This is about, by the way, I do have a book. It is finished, for those of you who have heard about it for a while. The website is being finished up right now, and the book is about what I'm talking about today, which is using real-world data and using data that matters to people, which I think is important in a class. It matters to people or the planet they live on, and that's what my book will be about. I've got 4 chapters all written. The website is being finished now, and I'm meeting with the publisher tomorrow. It will include data that you can download that goes with each of the 4 chapters, and this will be a little bit of a taste of what it's like. So you look at this ugly, horrid spreadsheet, and I was given this spreadsheet in my reporting for the book from a scientist. They don't care if it looks good for me to try to figure it out. So I've got 2 types of dates. I've got all these chemistry terms at the top. I tell students, you will get this. This is not, I mean, I was just as daunted as they are looking at that now. But watch where we get to, that's 85 to 90% is going to be analyzing and getting to know this data. I call it the data backstory. Why was the data created? Who created it? How did they fund it? Is there a bias in it? Do they have an agenda? Talk to the people, either through something they wrote up, like a data dictionary and a history of the data collection, or get on the phone with them. So I've been on the phone and Skype with this guy who produced this quite a bit for 1 chapter in the book. He was in Australia. So back to the students, they see that, and I start to explain to them how important Excel is to get a handle on it at the beginning of the semester, and I found a way to help them with that, and it's not lynda.com. That failed. So one student said to me, well, why would I have to do all that? I'm a designer. I mean, I'll just have someone else do that. And my point is, if you're going to design a good visualization, it's even more important that you understand the data and its history and its backstory. And you have to get used to using these tools. So these students look like students that I had, you know, at Elon and other places when I introduced data visualization in Excel. So another student, I've been teaching at various universities, so you'll never know who the student was, but I was on a committee on their media analytics thesis, for their master's thesis. And they had a lot of data from news organizations, from Fox News. No, they chose 2, MSNBC and Fox News. And they collected a lot of data on whether or not messages that came out of those news agencies would turn into policy. It's a long story. You know, were the politicians listening? Would this become policy? Was there a cause and effect? It was a very difficult thing. And they ended up with all this data, and the student came back with like 8 pages of data charts that she had asked a friend to just throw all the data into a software package called Stata and produce the charts. And the thesis had no explanation of the charts themselves because she didn't understand what they were. And the charts themselves did not have X and Y columns with descriptors. It was really sad. And so we worked with her, and she was a great person, and she was very smart. But I mean, this is the best example I have about how students just grab data and they very easily throw it into Tableau or another standalone package. And it'll make some pie charts, bar charts, scatter charts, networking charts, but they don't know what it is. And they don't know why it's, I mean, of course, the student is different here. They don't know why a circle is bigger or smaller, where they should encode it to color versus shape versus position, angle. These things don't come from intuition, they come from knowing the data intimately. Okay, so some data is more complicated than others. So this is where I get to, let's talk to students about things that matter. I've kind of just thrown the data on top of that just to show that we're not thinking about charts yet. Even though they think they're going to produce a chart right now, they got the spreadsheet. This is the backstory of the data that I'm talking about today, and a bigger version is in my book. But this scientist wanted to know how coral reef would be affected by ocean acidification. So I talked to the students about corals. They're living, they hunt for food, they reproduce. They provide habitat to more than 1/4 of all marine species. And I say that over and over, because that's why this project matters. So then we get into, here's some cute animals, right, that are affected, right? Here's, this is actually taken when I was on a dive by a friend. It's a seahorse that depends on coral reef. These are even cuter. They're tiny little dime-sized sea animals that require, they cannot have any more acid. They lose their skeletons. They lose their shells. All right, so cute animals. And then we plug some things onto the spreadsheet. We talk about, look, that big ugly spreadsheet, once we've learned about the data, all we care about right now is how much CO2 is coming into the ocean, what is the pH, which will tell us how acid it is, and what is the omega AR, the scariest one? That's aragonite. If they don't have enough aragonite, they can't grow shells. That's it. There's the story. We talk about all of the basics behind, the fundamentals behind that story, and then, as an Excel exercise, we start looking at, using the filters in Excel, we look at what was the top and bottom range of the aragonite. Is there a threshold? Talk to the scientists. Yes, when it's at 4, it goes below 4, they start losing shell. They can't grow or they die, depending on how low it goes. All of this came from that experiment in the ocean, the video that I showed you. So then we start looking at patterns in Tableau, and we see, wow, when pH goes up, that's when CO2 is very low. It's much less acidic. It's more alkaline because CO2 is nice and low. And we see the patterns from the data that the scientists collected. This is exploratory visualization. This is not for a presentation. We're analyzing with Tableau here. You can use it for analysis and for presentation. They've got to dig more into the analysis. We care about this. This is showing us CO2 is absolutely changing the pH of the ocean. Okay, and we already know this in the science world, but this is new to students. Here's the aragonite. When the CO2 is really, really low, there's more aragonite for them to build shells. This all came from that data. So my point is, in the paper I've written for you to look at would be to plug in a very strong section into any data visualization course that takes them through lots of Excel functions. I've listed the ones I think are most important in the paper. Take them through Tableau for analysis and exploration, not just for final presentation. That comes later. Give them little tidbits of pretty, visuals all the way through to keep them interested, but give them a subject that is interesting and one that they care about. And that is about it. I hope you'll get something out of the paper, which basically goes in more detail on all of these points that I'm trying to make, and that this exercise that I've written about in the paper should be able to be used with any data set, not just ocean acidification. It's going through the steps of analysis, getting the backstory on the data, getting into Excel enough to do the filters, and getting into Tableau to analyze it, and then you start designing your visualization. Then you go to all the stuff we see in all the syllabi now. you know, learning the encoding methods, the Edward Tufte principles. That is actually easier. It's the last step. So that's my piece. It'll be in my book as well. I hope you'll get something out of it. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Diane. I was talking with one of my alums earlier this week. She was guest speaking to one of my classes, and she's now working as the research director for one of the largest public relations firms in the Pacific Northwest, which is Microsoft's public relations firm. And she was talking about how hard it is for her to keep up with the changing tools and the changing techniques. And of course, her agency has money to do this with. So as I was listening to Kathleen and looking at her picture of the desert, I was thinking that maybe this is a good forum for us to start helping one another do that. And if you're interested and would give me your card or your email address on a piece of paper, I'll set up a LinkedIn and Facebook group for us to share ideas, if you're interested in doing that, so that we can share tips and things that we're learning and try to keep each other up to date, if that would be of interest to you. We are being recorded, so if you have questions or comments or want to share ideas, please raise your hand. I'll call on you, and then I'll repeat your question and comment to make sure that it's recorded. So, open it up for discussion. Please, Jessica.
Hi, one of the, well, actually, two presenters identified, you know, the need to teach students everything, and certainly paid campaigns are a part of that. And one of the things I struggle with teaching paid campaigns in Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or otherwise is the actual logistics of payment. And this is a bit of an in-the-weeds question, but I'm curious to know how, for those of you who teach paid campaigns, how do you organize those logistics in a way that make it so that students don't have to pay out of pocket, and that the data is easily accessible, and that the campaigns are actually like doable by students? Can any of you speak on that?
Okay. For those of you who teach paid campaigns, how do you make sure that the projects are doable, that students don't have to pay out of pocket, and okay. Great, and I'll throw that open to all of you.
I can speak to that. So first, I think an important thing to keep in mind, often when people hear media analytics or hear that we teach or in that area, they hear social media analytics, and that's not the case. Certainly that's a part of what we do and what we teach, but understanding holistically how data analytics are used across industries. So teaching what is the foundation of the advertising industry, why do we have a media system in this country that's built on ads, why is reach so important, audience size so important. All of those are foundational pieces that need to go into a full understanding of how a paid campaign in a social space would work. In terms of very specifically how do we teach without having students pay out of pocket, first, if you don't want to go through the process of working with real-world clients who can give you access to their data, my first recommendation is to use the Google Analytics. They have it's not a dummy account because it's an actual account, but it's a demo process through Google Analytics. Have you used it? Okay, so that's my first recommendation because you're working with actual data from Google. And you can get a sense of what paid campaigns do within how you're using paid search within Google through that demo account. It is not ideal because you don't get the story behind the data, which is so important. We actually, and several of our senior students are here right now, so this week they will start working with their clients in our capstone course. Students are partnered with actual clients who have a specific issue, need, or problem, and in order to be a class client and get a very handy report on things like audience development, social media, a social media audit, an SEO report, they do need to give students access to their data. So we ask small businesses, a lot of nonprofits this term. We're actually doing a focus on sustainability within the course this term, so many of the clients are related to environmental nonprofits, and people jump at the chance to work because many organizations are it's not that they don't have data, it's that they don't have the expertise to understand what that data means. So we ask, can we have access to the data that you currently have, and our students will provide you some of that expertise and advice. So that tends to be how we go about it, and I've found, again, first year, so I'm only just now starting to get to know the area, but not an issue getting class clients. People are very eager to work with us. That help?
Anybody else? Other questions? Yes.
Are you running into any ethical concerns for your classes at this point?
The question was, are you running into any ethical concerns with for your classes at this point?
Yes. I don't want to. Other. Go ahead. Again, we are incredibly lucky to, or not lucky. It's been. It was intentionally built, but we spend a lot of time talking about ethics, data ethics. What does it mean to, for example, you can scrape thousands of tweets. People who tweet aren't necessarily aware that that data is potentially, although it's publicly available, maybe it's not immediately seen as, oh, my tweet might be downloaded and compared to my location and used for a potential study. Facebook data as well. There are a multitude of ethical issues involved at this time in the data industry. It's part of why I feel so strongly that a foundation in communication overall, communication law, ethics, a liberal arts mindset is so incredibly important right now for the growth in the data industry. You might have heard of a company, Cambridge Analytica. I don't know if anybody, small company, they do some politics work, raised some very interesting conversations. We had, but even before that, for some of the students we've had, in fact, Maddie may want to talk, but we talked about things like, anybody an OkCupid user? Hey, you want the entire data set on OkCupid? It's out there. Ashley Madison users here? Probably not, right? You're not admitting it. I can tell you if you are, though, because that data set's out there, right? So we've got a lot of issues there. Do you want to talk to that?
I mean, I think I can just speak to 3 out of my 4 classes this semester are media analytics driven. So when this whole Cambridge Analytica thing happened, it was obviously the discussion of a couple days, but it wasn't a new discussion. I think everyone in this room talks about this a lot, but the problem with when it becomes ethically murky is that those of us who aren't in this room, people who don't understand media analytics, don't understand that they're being tracked constantly. You're being tracked constantly. I don't have one of those little screen things on my camera laptop, so it's listening and seeing everything I'm doing. Our phones are tracking devices, and this data is being taken from us constantly, but people are unaware of it. So I have friends and students. We had dinner the other night with a couple friends of mine, and a business major said, this is completely incorrect. This is so wrong. How could they do this? Facebook took all of this, and you're giving it to them. You're not reading what's happening. You're giving it to them, and people are just unaware of what's being taken and what you're giving. So I think that's just, people aren't as aware.
I totally agree with you on that. And I think the whole fight over the right to maintain your privacy, I think that's kind of naive. I think everything that we do today, if you don't think that it's not going somewhere, you're foolish and you're crazy. There's really no way to stop it unless you shut down all the access to these type of internet or digital capabilities that companies have. I'm of the mindset now where at first I didn't want to get my phone number out of my address. But even applications that you write on paper somewhere get logged into a computer somewhere and become part of the system. So do you think that the Cambridge thing is really something really terrible and really awful, or is it something that we can expect to see more of in the future?
The question was, first of all, that Bruce said that he agreed with our speakers and that people needed to be aware that they're giving that information and not be naive about it. And then you ask whether you think that Cambridge Analytica is going to be an isolated event or whether it will be common in the future.
I mean, I hope it would be an isolated event, because the key issue with what happened is the way they manipulated the data. they took the data and I found isolated people who were lonely and targeted them with like those political ads for this way or that way. And I think the way that I've at least interpreted it, but from my eyes and a student's eyes and the way students are talking about it, is that we feel like Facebook's our social media platform that we're on all the time, and yes, we're giving it away, but that people can manipulate and take that data and kind of like abuse our emotions. That was loud. So kind of just like how that interprets to personal connection, I think people are, once again, unaware, and I would hope that doesn't continue to be a problem because it was used very negatively. And if it continues to be a problem, there's going to be some laws that are going to hopefully, well, not hopefully, but they're going to cause issues for the entire industry probably.
Chorus, to brief the questions, I think as the instructor professors, so if we work with the real data from the real client, in my class, my practice, I have the trainings for the, confidential information training because my client actually are very cautious about this data. So my students actually from the beginning of the semester sign this form to let the students know they have, you cannot distribute this data. You just use data for the class academic purpose. So that is, I do not share a lot of information from my presentation because my client actually are very cautious about this information. So I think that is actually a very important link. When we teach media analytics, we should have kind of these trainings before we, let our students access to the real data and what's the kind of the purpose you want to use for the data.
On a very practical level, just related back to using paid search, we do have students often sign non-disclosure agreements, which does make it difficult when students are putting together portfolios because the work that they do often is not something that can be shared publicly in a portfolio, and that is a practical issue that is difficult to address.
I'm sorry. Well, from an organizational standpoint, if this were to become more common, what I teach my PR students is that their decision-making guide should be, if this becomes public tomorrow, because anything could be, right? There's no such thing as a secret. If it becomes public tomorrow, how would you feel about it? And then how would you prepare to address it if it were to become public tomorrow? So that should really be their guide for how they're using. I think if everyone used that as a guide for decision-making and how they use our data, that would help. But then also, how would you address it if it becomes an issue? You just have to think about that because if it's out there, it absolutely could become public tomorrow and be an issue.
I just can't let this go about your question about ethics in Cambridge Analytica. It's not just so much that, of course, we all know Facebook has our data and it can go anywhere, but we didn't know that our data would be used to spread fake news and also to possibly change election results as a result. So I think that should be discussed in classes.
Also, please talk about the Equifax data leak in all of your classes, because we are not talking nearly as much about that as we are Cambridge Analytica at this point, and we are placing some of the blame for data, it wasn't a data breach or a leak for Facebook, it was selling data, on the users who choose to use that platform, whereas we have several examples of times that data has been distributed or leaked that users had no say in the collection or distribution of that information. I didn't choose to have Equifax track my spending. They are a credit organization that does that. So these are big issues and certainly will continue.
And I'll just add this, that in my research for the book, I'm looking at biometrics. And when you look at what companies like Nielsen are learning through neuroscience and psychology and start looking at how that's being applied to data analytics and personal data, it is terrifying. That is a different area of ethics that we're going to have to address if we're teaching in this area. Don, I think you had your hand up next.
I'm not sure what you meant by reporting in the aggregate.
Summarizing the data rather than carving out individuals and groups of people in that.
I would potentially look to the Association of Internet Researchers, who have spent, I would say they probably have, they've been developing ethical standards for some time now that have addressed many of the emerging issues that we are seeing. There were years ago these conversations started happening, particularly related to research and data ethics in an online space. In terms of what's the prevailing ethical, I wouldn't, ethical egoism, I would say, is probably the prevailing point or the prevailing theory at this point, and I'd like to see that change.
I hate to say it, but we are out of time. I know that there are several more questions. Please join me in thanking our panelists.